any other topics that you would want me to talk about, or any ideas you want to share, just to try to keep it as open and as friendly as possible going forward. Right. So, coming to this topic, I thought it would be best to break down, especially if you are a startup or a company or even an independent person, the best way to sort of understand the role of design and communication is to think of, let's say you have a product or a service that helps solve a certain problem. So if you imagine a sort of a triangle structure, so there's a product as service on top, there's design, and there's comms, and design and communication are almost similar. So there's a triangle that's formed, and in between that triangle is what is called a brand experience. Uh, and all three of those components working together create the brand experience that your end user or your target customer comes across. With that said, let's get a little bit into the design process in specifics, because I think oftentimes it can come across as a bit cloudy, a bit vague, a bit innocuous. How do designers actually go about designing a certain solution or coming up with certain ideas? How do they help teams in achieving their goals, etc.? So what I'm going to do is break down a very broad canvas, a very broad process that we tend to follow in our entire, excuse me, just 1 minute. Right. Sorry for that. My phone was going off. Right. So I'll put across a very broad process we tend to follow as designers when we go over a task, and how we finally end up coming up with a creative solution which we feel will solve the problem. So to start off with, oftentimes a company or an agency comes up to a couple of designers saying that, hey, we have this problem we are facing. We want to increase sales for a particular product, or we feel that people are not aware of our brand or not aware of what is it that we exactly do. So so you need to have a certain situation before getting knee deep into it. And the first question we often might ask is, why do you feel that's a problem? So in that sense, we help the client as well go through the entire understanding of why exactly is the problem a problem in itself. So it helps them introspect a little bit. So that's called the background of a problem. So there's a problem statement that often comes up, and you are trying to understand the background of the problem. Why do they exactly think it's a problem to start off with? Once we understand that, okay, fine, it's a genuine problem that is being faced by the company or the organization, the next step we often take is to understand who exactly is your target audience, who exactly is your end customer. We in design we often like use a term called user profile or user persona. What it essentially means is a simple way of describing your customer in a very simple format. For example, if a user profile could be uh, consisting of demographics, where this person lives, what is their age, marital status, are they, where do they work, what's their typical day like, what kind of services do they use, do they have any challenges in their particular life that they face, do they have any goals that they aspire to, might they need your solution at some point in their lives. So I can get into the details of how a user persona is generally constructed later on in the session. But essentially, that it is quite important to understand who your target audience is. And oftentimes, companies have a conception of who their customer profiles is. Or if they don't have it particularly mapped out, then we try and help them understand exactly who their end customer is and how to map it in a way that makes it easier for them also to understand. Once you have your sort of target audience set, it's also a good idea to get a background of the company's values as a brand. Uh, what exactly do they represent? What exactly do they stand for? Do they have any existing brand language set in place so that all of this information would help us in creating the final, design solution at the end of the day, and to make sure that it doesn't stray away too far from what the brand believes in. Uh, Otherwise, it might be a mismatch. You end up, let's say, creating some sort of an advertising campaign, or maybe you end up creating a digital product, but the entire design and the entire messaging seems very different from what the brand, how the brand is perceived by its end customer. So they might be a complete mismatch in terms of creating a design solution. So background, what's the problem, who your target customers are, a brief background about your company in terms of its brand values, what does it believe in, your brief company background. And once you have that sort of set in place, the next step is to try and start coming up with certain iterations, certain prototypes, very simple ideas of what uh, solutions could possibly help solve your problem. Because you've gone and understood your target customer, you understood uh, the atmosphere, the brand values, you've understood the problem context. If you feel there's not enough study done in the initial areas, then more research should be spent on the initial stages before coming to building prototypes or building quick ideas of how solutions can be built out. Once we do get to solutions part, it's quite simple. We, as you know, often designers try and like to create a lot of quick ideas as to what could possibly work. So we might just start writing ideas down, drawing them on pieces of paper. It's really simple. At times, we often involve the client as well. We might even involve end customers in co-creation sessions where we have workshops with them. We sit down and we give them cues to think about what ideas could work, what ideas could not work. And we this is a way for all of us to try and arrive at a couple of or probably a couple of ideas which you feel are feasible and desirable. So feasibility and desirability are generally two parameters by and large we use to streamline and sort of understand that which ideas we might take forward. We can come up with maybe 15, 20 ideas, but we realize that not all of them will be feasible or desirable, based on the client's requirements, based on probably the kind of medium used by a certain customer. If your target audience is mostly in print media and you come up with a certain idea that is, let's say, only digital, let's say maybe you'll only publish on Facebook or Twitter. So that's going to be a mismatch in that case. So hence you try and make sure that it's working in terms of feasibility and desirability. It's an idea that you would like to see implemented. Clients like the idea as well. So there's alignment in terms of that. And maybe if you have a chance to interact with the end customer and pitch your ideas to them and see if you can get some feedback, very early stage ideas, then that's great. So if you get an alignment on these particular aspects between the designer, the client, and the end customer, then that's even better. And what that helps you do is take very simple ideas and concepts you already created and then start developing them into actual high fidelity designs, right? So if it's a communication campaign and you come up with very simple, uh, let's say on a piece of paper, you draw a simple poster design or you create a couple of words on probably a square. You draw a square, you write a couple of words, an image, and you draw an image, try and show it to a couple of people. Some might resonate, some might not resonate. Uh, if ideas do resonate, you try and then polish it up a little bit in terms of a digital format, create something, the designs will create something in Photoshop, make it a bit more polishable, and then go back again to the clients, to the end customers, see what their reactions are. Is this resonating with them? Is this clicking with them? And gradually you keep developing and iterating on this process till you arrive at a single solution, which you can then scale up and implement in terms of helping solve that problem. And once you create a final solution and you decide to scale it up, one metric which we try and keep in mind is how do we judge success. So oftentimes when we are talking with a client early on in a project, we often ask them that what does success mean for you? You do have this problem that you want to solve, and we will try and solve that problem. But what do you imagine success like? So they might say sales increase by 5x, 5 times the sales increases for a particular product that they have. So we're like, fine. So now you have a metric in your mind by which you can try and judge the success of your particular solution which you designed. And then when we do scale out the solution, we try and make sure to capture some metrics which feed into the sort of success scenario that was mapped out early on. And we see whether it's meeting the particular target that we set in our minds early on, or whether it's not meeting it. If it's not meeting it, why is it not meeting it? Is there a problem in the messaging? Is there a problem in the way it was implemented? What exactly went wrong? So it's not so the process of designing with everybody involved doesn't end once the final solution gets launched. If it's a digital product that's created, once you create the product and you launch it out, the process doesn't end there. It's a process of continuous reflection that has to happen. People start using it, they start interacting with your brand again, because your product is a representation of your brand, which is designed over there. And if they don't have a good experience, if something feels off, if in terms of functionality as well, that might then feed into back in the design process what exactly went wrong. Uh, so in a sense, this is what I sort of laid out. Is by it's a very broad process. It might get specific depending again on the kind of situation or kind of problem that comes to a designer, whether it's an in-agency designer or an independent designer. And people try and customize their processes, but by and large, this is generally how we do tend to work. And oftentimes, if we feel that certain areas from our experience are lacking, for example, if we are trying to solve if you're trying to, let's say, build a particular digital app or a digital product early on, and we decide that the company's brand has not yet been built, or there hasn't been a lot of thought gone into the brand strategy and the basic building blocks. So we might give a suggestion that while you're building a product, you also need to think about what are your brand values, what do you believe in, and is that visually translated as well? Is there a brand style guide that's already there? Because at the end of the day, that also creates a perception of your organization. Uh, and perception and the time a person interacts with your brand, whether they see it on television, whether they see it on a mobile phone, they go through your website, each time an interaction takes place, it's an opportunity for you to build a relationship with a person, right? Build a relationship with your potential end customer, or build a relationship with perhaps somebody who's not necessarily in your target profile that you didn't know of, but they end up interacting with your product service in that sense. So that's pretty much how it's all sort of spanned out. I'm going to pause now, and I'm just going to see if there are a couple of questions. 1 second. How do you do customer surveys? Right. So that seems to be a slightly broad-ended question. When you say how do you do customer surveys, Vignesh, what exactly do you mean in terms of finding out who your customers are? What do they want? What do they need? In terms of, are you asking specifically from that perspective? There's a question from Sunit. That's the next one. How do you ensure product and marketing design go hand in hand? Well, I think the first thing I think to understand is good product design is good marketing in itself. If you have a good product built out, the best marketing, in my view, is word of mouth. You might run great ads promoting a certain product, but if you've really thought that there is a crucial problem that you are solving through your product, and you've created a great user experience uh, in your entire design, that in itself creates great marketing. And oftentimes, if your base product in itself seems lacking, you might create a product and then you realize that people aren't necessarily using it. And if that gets then again thought of as maybe it's not marketed as well, so let's try and market it and get more people to use it. But then your product is not necessarily solving a real problem that people really need. So then that goes back to product design. So as I said, great product design on its own is great marketing in itself. If you look back to, the great example is Apple. You look at Apple, or you look at Spotify, or you look at even Airbnb, that show now they do run certain marketing campaigns as well. But when you create a great product with a great user experience, you know, it creates great marketing in itself. And word of mouth, by and large, I truly feel is extremely strong marketing, because it comes from people on whom you rely, on whom you trust, uh, your close friends or your colleagues, and the ability to get pulled up by it's very high. It's very immediate and it's very impactful. So yeah, so that's I hope that answers your question. In case if it doesn't, or if you have a follow-up question, please let me know. Right, so we have about 10 minutes left. I'll wait for 5 more minutes to see if there are any more questions from anybody. Vignesh, can you probably clarify a little bit about your question on the customer service aspect? I'm not sure if I understood very correctly, because it seems very broad-ended. Because if you want, do you want to solicit feedback from your customer on a certain product? It, you know, it sounds a bit broad-ended in my view. What exactly do you mean by customer service? Like getting feedback, design type of questions to ask, right? Okay, got it. Right. Uh, so it depends. So let's say you create a particular design. So imagine a scenario. Let's say you are creating uh, an app, or you're creating a website, and you create some very simple wireframes, low fidelity wireframes, uh, and then you might take them to a couple of customers, your end user, your end users. So one thing to clarify is what exactly you want feedback on, in terms of, do they feel, for them, what is most important for the user, uh, in terms of, if, does the user need to see, for example, if there's a screen, like you have a very simple prototype of a screen, and on top of the screen, they're showing, let's say, feature recommendations that come up on the first page. Uh, and when you do show it to other person, we show the particular, these particular designs. The first question might be, do you feel that this is relevant to you or not? Right? Uh, Based on the particular elements that you've designed on the screen. And they might answer that, yes, we feel that this might be relevant, or no, we don't feel that this will be relevant. And if they answer in the negative, then the question to follow up is, well, why do you feel this might not be relevant to you? And then they might give an answer. So that's again, as I said, that it depends on the kind of product that you're trying to build, the kind of problem you're trying to solve, and the kind of design solution that you're going for. Whether it's a communication design solution, you're trying to create posters, you're trying to create a social media campaign, or if it's a more digital solution, you're trying to create an app design, you're trying to create a web design of that kind. And the type of questions and testing that you do is very particular to that situation in itself. Uh, and you need to the first questions you need to ask is, what do I hope, does this design resonate with the, if this design resonates with the person, then how do we make sure it resonates? So we try and set a couple of questions we want to ask them. Does this feature feel right to you? Do you feel that this particular placement of probably this button is too low on the screen, right? And there's also an observation thing that you could do. So when you, let's, for example, if you develop certain screens on a phone, proper digital phone, you make an app and a person is using it. One thing which you could do is just observe how they go through the entire app. Do they get stuck at a place? After going screen by screen, do they feel difficulty in clicking on certain button somewhere? So oftentimes, observation also helps, and other times asking directed questions also helps. And it sort of depends, again, as I said, very particularly on what the context of your design is, in that sense. So that's generally how we go about it. And I'm sorry if I'm not able to answer it very specifically, because it's very contextual in nature, in that way. So Neeraj, how do you get into design, the best places to learn? Well, so generally there are two routes to get into design. One is either you join a design school and you go through a certain education. So you either do a undergraduate degree and a master's degree, you learn in the community and you learn design. A lot of folks do that way because you get a very structured way of education. The other route is a more a self-education way where you try and pick up. Then there are a lot of courses available online, on Coursera, and very structured courses as well. Interaction Design Foundation is a great place for learning a couple of courses. So you could try that as well. But I think education is one aspect, and the second aspect is actually working. Whichever route you choose in terms of education, the actual experience is when you go and work and you create you create something, whether you work in an agency, a design agency, or whether you decide to work with a proper company or an organization inside the in-house team, and you face a proper challenge, you face proper scenario situations, you meet a lot of people who are not only from design, but they're from different backgrounds. You meet folks who are from perhaps they might be developers. You might be maybe people who are domain experts in different fields. You might be meeting senior management people who have a very different way of how things work. You might be meeting folks on strategy. So sitting with all of them and then working with them and then creating, bringing your own skill sets of design and then creating something. That is, I think, for me, the real way of learning. So you try and get education, whether from the self-taught route or from, professional colleges through their degrees or courses. And then you try and work in a firm, you work in an agency, and you apply and learn through the experience of, how to do good design. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Any suggestion for design inspiration? Well, I would say, in terms of design inspiration, again, it's quite broad. Uh, so maybe if you depends on what kinds of designs you're looking at. So if you are, because inspiration can pretty much come from anywhere, in my view. Inspiration can come from just talking to people about their daily lives. Inspiration can come from observing objects in your house, reading a certain book that you have, obviously looking at other products, other firms which have created great, like as I said, if you look at cred, they've created great products in itself, so you can definitely look at them for inspiration. uh, but I feel inspiration is probably, it's all around you. Once if you learn how to look at the world properly, you can find inspiration pretty much anywhere. So a lot of people go on Pinterest for inspiration, but then I'm not really in the Pinterest camp. Looking at a lot of pretty pictures over there, I feel that you find a lot of inspiration in the real world. Talking to a lot of people. You're talking to people in your own company as well, talking to people outside your firm, talking to end customers. So that's great. Another question, would you suggest pursuing a formal design course in my 30s? Absolutely. There's no age as such set for education. You can study design whenever you would like, you know. Uh, Start at 30, you want to start at 40. There is no age. If you really feel that you want to study design and if you feel that a formal design course is the route for you to go, as opposed to maybe a self education route, definitely, apply to colleges, there's a lot of colleges. There's Srishti, there's NID, there's Indian Institute of Art and Design in Delhi, a couple of other places. Just check them out, do apply, and it'll definitely help you. Yeah, I mean, for me, there's no like end result for that. I work on UI, but not going on any formal training at times. I don't edge compared to those with the design college. Yeah, I know that's true. In a design college, you essentially get an environment to study. So when you go to a design school, it's professors, there's students, there's a structured way of going about it. But I would highly suggest you check out, Coursera and Interaction Design Foundation, because in my view, both of them have good structured courses to learn. And do check them out, and if you feel like you can afford it, if it's something that's in your budget as well, much cheaper to a design college. Definitely a design college will have a high fees rate, but then you get different benefits on that side as well. So maybe even try doing like a cost benefit situation, you know cost versus benefit, which one works for you at this particular stage in your life. uh, so yeah, I mean, I hope that helps you in your particular journey towards design. Right. So it's 7:30. I said sorry, 7 o'clock. So I'm going to stop it now. I'm going to stop the live stream. But thank you so much for joining this live stream, and it's been great helping answer some of your questions. I'm available on LinkedIn as well. Just search for my name, Waliullah Hashmi, uh, and message me any other thoughts you have. If there are any further questions you would like to be answered, please connect with me over there. And I would love to connect with all of you guys as well. Right. So thank you and hope you have a great day.